it's backwards and forwards, yeah. Not forget.
You could fill the front seats at the front, please, because there are one or two people stuck in traffic. It's going to be easier for them to get in at the back. Okay, good morning everybody, welcome to the Allerton Project and the Kelloggs Origins Conference. My name is Jim Egan, and along with my colleague from EFFP, Duncan, we're going to be facilitating and taking you through today. There's a couple of usual safety, amenity, all those bits and pieces. We're not expecting a fire alarm today. If there is all those bits and pieces, we're not expecting a fire alarm today. If there is one, fire exits are there, front door, and just around the corner there, and the assembly points at the front in the car park. Hope you've all found the loos. They're just down the corridor from the kitchen. And the one other one, just so you're aware, there's a couple of people going to be filming video today because Agricology, who are one of our partners in information dissemination, are going to film it today and be tweeting some stuff out, and our team from Courteenhall. And hopefully we're going to make a video of the key highlights so that people can come back and reference where we've been. And our intention is also to make available the presentations with a web link for you after today. So you will hopefully be able to get the slides and the presentations afterwards. A little tiny bit of background before we start. The majority of what we're doing today is based on what we've done here at the Allerton Project, a lot of it in partnership with Duncan, about working with commercial supply chains to encourage farmers to do good environmental and relevant environmental work on their farm. It's a challenge that we really do see being very, very relevant as we go forward in the future, and I think hopefully the key thing you'll get from today, with leading with Kelloggs, who very kindly have been the lead sponsors for today, is that what we try and do is work with farmers and work bottom up rather than top down. And I hope you'll see as we go through the presentations and how we work today that that's what we're trying to achieve. But the key thing we're trying to achieve is actually getting some sort of environmental change. So we're not looking for box ticking, we're not looking for just doing it because somebody wants you to, we're looking for genuine engagement and change. And I hope that the presentations will demonstrate how that works. Before I hand over to Dave and Kellogg's and the main sponsors, I'd also like to thank Waitrose and Nestle for supporting the event today. And for me that shows something that's really nice and open. The one thing I've learnt working with those three partners is they're quite happy for us to share what they do, and they're really keen to be able to demonstrate it. The other thing for me for today is please ask questions. I'll allow the speakers to say whether they'd like to be interrupted. That doesn't always work. I don't mind. But there will be the time at the end of each presentation for a couple of questions, and that's really what we want to get out of today, is people to actually learn and be able to take away from best practice that we do. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Dave. Just one last thing, there are a couple of latecomers, so just excuse people as they come into the room, and we will be breaking for coffee when we've been through the Kellogg's presentation as a first set. Okay, I'll hand over to David, who is the European Sustainability Manager for Kellogg's, and he only started 6 weeks ago. He's in his 7th week. I'm quite impressed. He spent last week in the States, and his next trip's been here to the Allerton Project, where we met him for the first time yesterday afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Jim, and good morning, everyone. And firstly, on behalf of Kellogg's, I'd like to welcome you all here, and we're delighted to be sponsoring this event, and I think very, very important, on a very important topic. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to travel here today as well. So, as Jim said, I'm responsible sourcing manager for Kellogg's in Europe, and I'll talk a little bit about the Kellogg business and the Origins program. But I think the importance of agriculture and the agri supply chain to our business, it's critical, it's crucial to our business. That's where our food comes from, and the ability to be able to work with and support and understand farming and the challenges that are there, and the challenges that are emerging on the environmental and social side as well, is really, really important for Kellogg's. and I think that's why this conference today is so timely as well. So I think without further ado, I'd also just like to say, as Jim had said, there's some really interesting presentations as well from Nestle and Waitrose. So it's great to be able to, you know, in this area, collaboration and sharing is really important. There's always a commercial tension, obviously when you work for multinationals, but at the same time, you know, when you work in the area of sustainability in particular, nobody has all the answers. You know, everyone is trying to improve their supply chains, trying to improve their business, trying different things and learning as they go. So it's important to collaborate and share. And there's a lot of pretty competitive sharing in all the industries I work with. Just to give you a little bit of my background, so as Jim said, I've been with Kellogg's. This is week 7 now, and I'm still not quite sure what time zone I'm in at the moment. I spent a week in Michigan last week at the Kellogg's global headquarters, just to get an understanding of I suppose what Kellogg's are doing globally and the sort of the global corporate commitments. So prior to that, I started my career with Diageo. I worked for 15 years with Diageo, mainly in Guinness and in brewing, but a little bit in distilling as well. So again, the agri supply chain really important there in terms of the raw materials, the hops, the malt and barley, and we've done some work in that area and did a lot of work on manufacturing sustainability for a number of years. And then for the last 4 years I've been working with Dairy Gold, who are a dairy cooperative in the south of Ireland. They process about 20% of the milk pool in Ireland, so turnover of about €1 billion. So reasonably large dairy business in Ireland, and again working across broad supply chain sustainability for them. So let me kick into my presentation. So maybe just initially just talk a little bit about Kellogg's, who we are. So these are some of the top line numbers for Kellogg's. Obviously a very, very significant company globally, sales of $13 billion in 2017. You know, 33,000 employees, mainly in the working in the cereals and the snacks space. So some of the, obviously a lot of the brands you'd be familiar with. Some people may be familiar may know that Kellogg's also own the Pringles brand. So Pringles is a big part of the Kellogg's business as well now. Potatoes and sourcing of potatoes are important for that business. And in North America, there's a frozen foods business, and there's actually an egg business as well as part of Kellogg's, but that's not as relevant for Kellogg's in Europe. So some of the things, I suppose one of the key areas that Kellogg's, from a social perspective, one of the flagship programs is the Breakfast for Better Days program, and that's around hunger and food waste, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll touch on that maybe on the following slides. This is our strategy, the rocket as is described in Kellogg's, and as you would expect, there's a strong commercial aspect of the strategy. It's about growing sales, it's about growing market share, and expanding the operating margin. And there's 2 ways you can do that in the business. One is by growing the value of the brands that you're selling, and the other is by cutting costs, and the emphasis has moved more towards growing top line growth, so growing value of sales, and responsible sourcing is a key part of that as well. So supporting that, on the bottom are what are known as the heart and soul boosters. So these are the values based drivers for the strategy, and these are critical to delivery of the top line growth as well. So there's 4 areas. There's nourishing with foods. That's got to do with nutrition. That's got to do with making sure that, you know, the products we supply are nutritious. So reductions of sugar and salt are some of the areas that are targeted there. Feeding people in need. So that comes back to the Breakfast for Better Days program. Nurturing our planet, which is the one I'm going to talk about mainly today, which is around responsible sourcing, sustainability, environmental, taking care of the environment, and then the values of the company as well, making sure that we live the values. W.K. Kellogg, the founder of Kellogg's, living those values of simplicity and accountability and authenticity. So just to highlight that this is a critical part of the strategy. So it's embedded in the strategy, which is, you know, I suppose traditionally businesses would have been very much focused on commercial strategy, but sustainability and responsibility is embedded in the strategy of the business. So why is sustainability and responsible sourcing important? Well, one key area is what I describe as the rise of the empowered consumer. You know, in order for us to market our products, to sell our products, to grow, we need to be able to convince the consumer that these are products they want to purchase. And more with the rise of the internet and social media, the challenge is that consumers know more about where the food is coming from and want to know more, so there's more information available. So it's really important that companies like Kellogg's are proactive in terms of how they communicate with consumers. And tell the story of how the food is produced. So consumers are demanding more transparency in terms of supply chain. They're demanding that, you know, damage to the environment is reduced, or, you know, the environment is enhanced. So, you know, areas like climate change and biodiversity in food production are areas, and I think WWF actually came out, there was a report there only a couple of weeks ago where they were talking about the loss of biodiversity, and this is a real challenge now, and the food industry obviously has a big role to play in that. So one of the reasons for the Origin project is to look at those areas and see where we can work in the supply chain, and particularly the agricultural supply chain, to say, you know, how can we support farmers to have better outcomes in terms of both their, you know, their output and yield, reducing their inputs and reducing the damage to the environment, or you know, the impacts on things like climate change and biodiversity. So these are the commitments that Kellogg's have made from a global perspective. So they're sort of in two key areas. On the right-hand side, as you're facing it, conserving the natural resources, and this is probably the more traditional starting point for businesses in sustainability. It's around what you can control within the four walls of your business. Reducing energy, reducing carbon emissions, looking at packaging and the recyclability and resource efficiency of packaging, reducing your water use, reducing your waste. So lots of businesses, Diageo, where I worked previously, initially would have focused very much on these areas because these are within your control. But more and more businesses are realising that the left-hand side is where you're going to actually have a bigger impact. Because, and I'll take the dairy supply chain as an example because it's one I'm more familiar with at the moment. So in my previous role, I would have had conversations with customers who would have said to me that the dairy ingredients we were supplying to them would have been 70% of the embedded carbon in their products. And what are we doing about that? And then when we looked at our own supply chain in Dairy Gold, probably about 80% of that carbon was coming from farm. So if you're not engaging at farm level, you're not having the impact in your supply chain that you need to. You know, what you're doing within your four walls is great, but really, in order to have that significant impact, you need to broaden it out to your supply chain. And so the left-hand side here is the area I'm responsible for. And just to talk a little bit about some of the key areas here. So responsible sourcing covers, there are 10 ingredients that Kellogg are focused on specifically, and I'll talk about those in a second. And there are plans around how to improve and make the sourcing of those more responsible by 2020. Working with farmers and millers to implement more sustainable farming practices, so the Origin program fits there. There are other things we're doing with suppliers as well in relation to social sustainability, so the use of things like the SEDEX platform to ensure that suppliers are doing the right thing from a social perspective. The use of the Carbon Disclosure Project, CDP, to try and track the carbon emissions of our suppliers as well, and their contribution to our carbon footprint. Also working with smallholder farmers, which is not, so I think 2 hectares is the definition Kellogg used for smallholder farmers. it's not as relevant for the European business, but it is in certain areas of the world, in Latin America and in Asia in particular. And also diversity and increasing diversity in the agricultural supply chain, particularly around the involvement of women in farming as well. So they're the key areas and the key sort of commitments Kellogg's have made at a global level. Maybe just to talk about the ingredients. So these are the 10 priority ingredients, and the goal here is, through continuous improvement, focusing on metrics in areas such as carbon emissions, water, soil health. So obviously you can see corn here, for corn flakes, Rice Krispies and Cocoa Pops, wheat, which is obviously very relevant for the Origins program here in the UK, potatoes, fruits, sugar beets. So there's lots of ingredients here. Some of them obviously more relevant in Europe, but some of them, like palm oil, are ones which are obviously very topical as well, and ones which are key focus of NGOs and other external stakeholders in terms of how that supply chain is managed, and that's one where a lot of attention is paid to the sourcing of palm oil. This is just an example from the milestone report from 2017 of how this has been reported by Kellogg. So this is the wheat one I just pulled out of that report. So it's looking at how much of the ingredients is responsibly sourced, how many suppliers we're using, what countries we're sourcing from, the engagement with farmers, and how much we source annually. And then talks a little bit about things like water stress, some of the areas of water stress, where some work is being done, and a couple of the case studies as well, one being from the US and the UK program as well. So, what is the Origins program? So the Origins program was set up to engage and support farmers to develop more sustainable farming practices. Now, Duncan, who's coming after me, will give a more detailed description, I hope, as to what some of the areas that the Origins program has touched on. But as I mentioned earlier, it's looking at areas such as soil health. It's looking at areas like carbon emissions, like biodiversity. So these are just some of the farmers. So where is the Origins program? These are, as I said, some of the areas. Actually, one of the other areas I didn't mention was natural pest control. So there's a couple of examples in the rice supply chain, for example, of the use of bats to control insects in Spain, and the use of lilies to control crayfish. So this is an interesting story, and I hope I've gotten this right, but the crayfish, they actually burrow holes in the rice paddies, in the banks surrounding the paddies, and the water drains away. So by using lilies, the roots of the lilies prevent the crayfish from doing that. So it's the use of natural methods of pest control, are being looked at as well under the program. Cover crops, which is a big area for the UK program as well, and soil health, which I'm sure Duncan will touch on. So just where are we doing it? We're doing it in Italy. So there's a program in Italy working with rice farmers there. They're similarly in Spain, where we source a lot of rice, also in Spain in a couple of areas, one of them being the Delta del Ebro region in Spain, with rice growers, and then obviously in the UK as well. And now the UK program has been running, just speaking to Duncan, for about 5 or 6 years now at this stage. It's a well-established program, it's quite mature, and there's been lots of interesting work done. And we just had a meeting yesterday to talk about where it might be going for the next 12 months. So there's lots of opportunities there, and lots of good input. And it's I suppose worth highlighting as well that it is farmer led, in terms of we're not dictating to the guys what needs to be done. We're setting out the areas that we're interested in as Kellogg's, but the farmers are saying these are the areas we're interested in, and these are the areas we want to explore, and that has been to date been very successful in terms of the program here. So that's it from me. I know that's a very top line summary, very brief. I'm sure there'll be a lot more detail, and happy to take questions, but with the understanding that with only 7 weeks under my belt at this stage, it's going to be difficult for me to give you detailed answers, but happy to take questions, or if anyone wants to follow up with me in relation to any of the points, I'm sure I can get some more information on those as well. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the day. It's a very full and a very very interesting program ahead for the day. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave, and quite a decent knowledge for something from 7 weeks in. So the next speaker is our colleague here at the Allerton Project, Duncan. Duncan works for EFFP. They led the work with Kelloggs, and we came in about 4 years ago now, which is quite scary to think. Sometimes you look back and think, we've only been doing this for a year, but it's about 4 years now we've been working with Duncan, so I'll let him explain the detail of the programme.
Okay, thank you, and very impressive for 7 weeks in. It's going to put my presentation to shame, I think, and I've been doing it for 6 years. So Dave's sort of given the overview of what the Origins programme is about. I'm going to talk through some of the detail about what we're doing and how it works, and then Charlie's going to come after me and bring the whole thing to life, because he's actually a proper farmer in this. So what we're going to do is just talk a little bit about what is the Origins programme, how it works, what we get up to, and a little bit about commitment at the end. But I'm just going to start with a little bit about me, not too much. I'm a partner in a sort of niche consultancy business called EFFP. One of my other partners is sat at the back there as well. And we work in this funny little world. We work in this funny little world where the world of agriculture and the world of food sort of collide and come together. And that's the sort of space that we work in. I got involved with the Origins programme right at the beginning of its development. So we were pulled in by Kelloggs to help think about how they could reconnect with their growing base. So we sort of helped them develop the original idea, the original concept, and then been involved in the delivery across Europe in various guises, but very focused now in the UK. And I have to say, it's one of the things I'm most proud of in terms of consultancy work that I've done over the years. I think it's a really powerful programme. So why did it come about? It was founded because Kelloggs wanted to reconnect to the origins of where their raw materials come from. Come over here, I can see my own slides. And there's a statistic that's been used quite a lot by Kelloggs, and I've never really known how true it is, but I'm going to say it anyway, but please don't quote me. It's that 80% of what Kelloggs buy has a root on it at some point, whether that's actually in the raw materials growing out in the fields or the trees that are growing that end up into packaging. So 80%-ish has a root on it at some point, but they'd lost that connection. And great relationships with their immediate suppliers that lost the connection back to the farm. But we realised right at the beginning that any reconnection to the raw material had to be meaningful. It had to be real. You had to pass what we call the scratch test. So if anybody came along and said, let's have a look at this. Is this real? It had to be real, and that is really what underpins the Origins programme. So what's it about? Well, it enables farmers and growers to have access to the best agricultural practice and know-how whilst helping protect the natural habitats in the farm landscapes where Kelloggs grains grow. Nice big sentence. And there's two things that's really important there. There'll be a theme, I think, developing through the day. The natural landscape, natural habitat, environment is really, really important. But what's equally important, if not more important, because it facilitates the latter, is that farms need to be productive, efficient and profitable as well. And that, again, is one of the things that underpins the programme. It's also quite unique because we don't offer a premium. So we're not paying an additional price per tonne for the grain that's being produced. What we actually do is we fund activities that help farmers improve the way that they farm. And again, very beginning, and there are farmers out there who we invited along originally who didn't understand that concept and didn't get it, and that was fine. We parted away again. But it's quite important because what it means is that you're not just simply paying a premium on 200, 400,000 tonnes, whatever you're selling into the Kellogg supply chain. What you're actually doing is you're getting support and advice that will actually help improve the whole farm performance, not just the wheat or that tonnage that's been grown. As you've already heard, it's become a global programme. I'm just going to focus on the UK. So what is in it for farmers? Well, they receive the support and advice to improve whole farm performance. They're exposed to leading advisors and practitioners through regular workshops and events, and I'll give you some examples in a little while. We run large-scale farm-based trials as well, and I've said here, testing in a commercial environment, and that's really important because what we're doing here is actually testing things, trying things on farm. So they're not done in labs, they're not done in proper sort of research trials, if you like. It's on farm and farmers can actually see it, touch it, feel it, and really understand how it's affecting their systems. And we offer support through Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, through GM, enhanced environmental practice. And that word's really important, enhanced, because the work that they're doing is already fantastic. There's tons of great environmental work being done on farms. So what we're trying to do is just help them enhance that work, make better use of the schemes that are available out there as well. And that, like I say, it's a work that Jim very ably does for us. I put this slide in here, I only threw it in last night actually, it's a sort of a last minute thing, because one of the principles that we've always tried to stick to is, in terms of helping farmers, is trying to be on the top of the crest of the wave in terms of the advice and the knowledge and expertise and the trials and everything that we're doing. The farmers sort of self-select themselves into the group, they're all very active, innovative farmers anyway. So we want to be on top of that wave the whole time, and that's sometimes a bit of a challenge, because you don't want to fall off the wrong side of it either. From a Kellogg's perspective, it delivers a greater understanding and connection with the farmers that grow their grains. And like I said at the beginning, that's really important. It builds a reputation for helping farmers improve their financial and environmental performance, and it provides a connection and credibility to allow Kellogg's to tell their story, tell the story of their supply chain to the consumers. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play a couple of little videos which just sort of brings that to life a little bit. The first one is Little Farmers. It was actually shot probably 3 or 4 years ago now. So but that one's very much, you can find that on the Kellogg's website. And the second one is absolutely hot off the press. You're the first people to have actually seen this because we've only shot it over this summer. So, my volume assistant. Hopefully this will work.
Here at Woodland Farms, we've been going wheat for Kellogg's for around about 10 years. What's great about having kids on the farm is they're really inquisitive. They get to see the sort of natural origins of where their food comes from. So a lot of the food we eat comes from the fields around us. Learning where your food comes from, knowing that the traceability is there, is very important. We put in wild flowers along the sides of wheat to encourage the nature to help us with the farming. So what we try and do, we try and get 250 to 400 of these into a square like this. Make a little scratch like this, and scratch it back the other way. Every child. That's it. Well done, guys. So over the season, it has the equivalent of about 109 buckets worth of water, about 1,250 hours of sunlight. That's it. Look over here. When we get to harvest, we get the combine out. We start combining the crops. We cut them down, put them in a tank, and then take them to the grain stores. Who sits in the cow?
Yeah.
There you go. And what else is it? Big chick, come on. Yeah! Come on. We harvest about 20,000 grains of seed from that 1 square metre, about a kilogram's worth of wheat. And that wheat is milled down to produce about 28 bowls of cereal, which end up on the breakfast table. If we can get a little bit of knowledge into young guys now, really young, that'll be blossom, and hopefully they'll want to get involved and maybe one day become a farmer like I am.
That's scary, this is 2014 at that. This is the second one we just produced. Sorry. hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour how themselves, the program. So how does it work? It's, as Dave was saying, it's a farmer-led programme of activity, but it works within an Origins framework of natural heritage priorities, and I'll talk you through those in a second. But this farmer-led bit is really, really important, because if we're going to get meaningful engagement, it has to be doing things that the farmers actually want to explore and to do. And that's a really important part of the whole programme. And it's interesting actually as well that a number of years ago we were focusing on blackgrass control, because blackgrass is a real issue for the arable farmers. And it is a big issue, it's probably one of the biggest issues that farmers are facing, and we're doing quite a lot of work around it and helping. And one day the farmers turned around and said, you know what, the blackgrass stuff is really important and we need to continue with it, but there's lots of help and advice out there. So why don't we do something different with this programme? Because we've got the opportunity to explore other things in this programme, rather than just focusing on stuff that actually there's already lots of information about. And that was a really interesting insight, I think, at that time. Like I said, the aim is to always push the boundaries of current farming practice. That's what we're trying to do. We try to work in the field rather than the classroom. What do I really mean that? Like, we always try to be very practical in terms of what we do. Be out there with mud on our boots rather than just sitting in the classroom. That does backfire in March on the Cambridge Fens. I can see Jill laughing. But we actually lost the ability to speak because it was so cold. So sometimes the classroom is good. And this point, another really important point, we're trying to have built a relatively small community of farmers who are happy to share their knowledge and experience. And it's always a constant debate that we have, because we need enough farmers to have critical mass, because not all farmers are going to be able to turn up to every event. But at the same time, we want a small enough group that it becomes a community, they become friends, they trust each other, and they're happy to share knowledge as well. And that, again, is a really important point. And we combine this with leading experts to bring the latest thinking to us. And we facilitate farm-based trials, but we do it with scientific rigour in there. And over the last little while, we ran a cover crop trial that actually ended up being one of the biggest cover crop trials in the UK. And some people even suggested it's the biggest in Europe. It was very much based with farmers deciding what they wanted to do. They had the interest, they decided what they wanted to do on farm. But using NIAB in this case to actually help us, we actually made sure that we got proper controls in place, we got the proper base data collected, we were collecting all the data all the way through. They then pulled it all together, and because we had so many trials across the farms, we were able then actually to bring it together and do the statistical analysis and get proper, robust results. It actually became published papers, which is something we're very proud of achieving. I mentioned the natural heritage options. Right at the very beginning of the project, we did a little bit, Kelloggs did a little bit of consumer research, just trying to explore what resonated with consumers, what they might be interested in. And these are the 8 things that came up. So soil health and fertility, cover crops, compost and natural fertilisers, and pollinators, wildflowers, buffer strips, you can read it, etc. And that's quite important because it provides us a framework, but at the same time it's actually quite a broad framework that we can work within as well. So to sort of summarise, Origins is about providing resources, it's about providing facilitation, it's about providing expertise to help farmers improve the way that they farm. And there's been quite a lot of people involved in this process. On the left-hand side, that side is sort of the core group, if you like. So obviously Kelloggs is clearly important. Haygates are absolutely vital because they provide the supply chain, and George, again, is at the back here from Haygates. Obviously ourselves, Game Wildlife and NIAB, we are sort of the core team that drives the programme forward there. But on the right hand side, and I haven't got all the logos there by any means, but over the years we've had all sorts of people that have put time, resource, energy, expertise into the project as well. So what have we done so far? We have, I'm just going to go through each one, spend 5 minutes on each one of those points, is that all right? We have met 3 or 4 times a year in various different events. Stuff. I'm going to have to turn around to read this because I can't read it on that screen. We've learned about compost. We provide all the Origins members with free NIAB membership. NIAB agronomic packages are absolutely a fantastic resource, and we provide that to our members. Like I said, we've run the biggest cover crop trial in the UK. We've taken part in on-farm amendment trials. We've been published several times. We've studied and shared knowledge about blackgrass. We've learned about CAP changes and greening policies. We've learned even more and actually had the opportunity to influence forthcoming changes in farm policy as well. And that's going to be more and more important as we go through the next year. We've carried out environmental audits and received visits from Wildlife Conservation Trust, and just on that as well, this isn't big horrible audits that you've got to tick lots of boxes. This is Jim going out on farm, spending a day with the farmer, walking around, understanding what they've got, understanding what they're interested in, and then putting together 2 sides, no more, 2 sides, actually A3 as well, of just some shorts, things they could do to improve what they've already got. Where have we got to? We've visited Germany, we've also had our German colleagues back here, we've been to Spain to meet the orange rice growers, we've been to Denmark to learn how they cope with environmental legislation. That's the trip we went on this year, which was absolutely fascinating for lots of different reasons. We've visited so many places across the UK, from Rotherham to NIAC to Pigott to HGCA, etc. We've met at the cereals event, and more recently we now go to the groundswell event. We've had presentations from numerous experts, we've had individual visits from Philip Wright. Philip sits on our what we call our expert panel. He's available to the farmers anytime, and he's one of the country's leading experts in rectifying problems with soil structure. So a very important guy involved in our group. We're part of a WhatsApp group. Occasionally people post content on there rather than banter, but it's mainly banter. Some of us have become film stars. We've got a group-only web portal. We've seen newsletters. We've explored cutting-edge technology. We've taken part in mycorrhiza trials. Open Farm Sunday has been quite an important thing as well. Kelloggs has supported that with a number of different farmers, providing sort of cereals to the process and helping sort of join the dots, if you like, right through the supply chain with all the people that come onto the Open Farm Sunday things. And we've eaten well and we've drunk a lot of beer. Most of our trips involve a brewery tour, it has to be said at some point. But all of this has been paid for and covered by the Origins project. Lastly, I was just going to touch on commitment, because again, it's an important principle of the Origins programme right from the very beginning. And that is, it's voluntary. It is a voluntary programme. We don't force anybody to do anything. There's no obligation to join, there's no obligation to remain in the programme. But those who do join are expected to take an active part. They're expected to share the results with both within the group itself, but also more broadly in the agricultural industry, and then of course with permission consumers as well, customers as well. And farmers are able to leave the programme at any point. We reserve the right to ask farmers to leave should they not adhere to the spirit of the project. I have to say, however many years, 6 years, we've never had to do that. But they are able to leave at any point. And that, I think, keeps us quite sharp, because if we're not delivering what the farmers want, then they're not going to want to stay in the programme. What I'm going to do, I'm aware that you might have some questions, or you may not, but I'm suggest if we just keep moving through to Charlie. Just going to finish this by playing a video that's about Charlie's farm, just to provide a link I'm talking about.
This is Courteenhall Farm in Northamptonshire. We're a 3,000-acre farm growing 2,000 acres of cereals, wheat, oilseed rape, spring barley and spring beans. Some people may not know the journey that their breakfast cereal goes through. We start cultivating seed beds in August and September, ready for planting the seed in October. We nurture the plant through the winter and grow it through the spring, ready for harvesting it in July and August. From here, our grain is sent to a local mill where it is prepared to be sent to Kelloggs to be made into breakfast cereal that we now love. We decided to join the Kelloggs Origins programme because of all the benefits it brings to us as a grower, and also the Haygott's mill is only 15 miles away, so from a food miles point of view, we're really close to our end user. Here at Courteenhall, we welcome the environmental emphasis from the programme. The estate has been here in the Blake family for several hundred years, and the environmental benefits we receive from the programme will make sure the estate is here for the next generation. It's been a challenging year, but with the support of other farmers and with the Kelloggs programme, we've had a lot of learnings through the year which we can take forward. There's a great community spirit of the Origins programme. We meet up 3 or 4 times a year and exchange ideas and knowledge to help each other out to make us better farmers. I love what I do, so to be able to meet other farmers who also love what they do is great. Not only is it a support network, but it's a very friendly club as well.
very much for that, Duncan. So next up is one of those farmers who stayed in the club and been with us in the project for just over 2 years, I think now, Charlie. Joined fairly late on. You've seen a bit of background to the farm, and I think Duncan's made it clear, and I have, and I'm sure I will 3 or 4 times through the rest of today, that actually linking with the farmer is the most important part of all of this work, because without them, A, we don't get the food we need, the product that Kellogg's need, we don't get the environmental delivery and all the other good stuff we've been talking about. So we're going to hand over to Charlie, who's going to take you through what he's been doing with the...
Morning all. You'll have to excuse me, my presentation skills and my PowerPoint skills are nothing compared to these guys. So I'm just going to run through a little bit about me, a little bit about the farm and what we do on the farm, and then the benefits we get from the Origins programme. I'm keen if anybody wants to interrupt, stick your hand up, that would be good. So those of me, I've been farming for quite a long time. I joined Courteenhall Farms in 2016. I'm quite technically competent, which I think is important now as farm managers and as farmers as we're moving forward. And the ongoing CPD stuff that I've done and continue to do makes us better at what we do. So the farm itself extends to 1,200 hectares, 3,000 acres. As you saw in the video, we've got 800 acres of combinable crops. There's about 320 acres of parkland, 80 hectares of mid-tier, and we're contract farming another 450 hectares. There's 3 full-time staff and myself. We have also just got planning consent in for a chicken unit as well, so we're looking to diversify ourselves some more. The HLS and ELS schemes, which we have had and we're now into the mid-tier, a lot of the land and the way we chose what was going into the scheme and what was staying as commercial cropping, as it were, was by using some of the technology we employ on the farm, such as yield maps, soil maps, so we could produce growth fields across a rotation and see which part of the farm was actually producing a profit and which part was costing us. Taking then a very commercial decision, the areas which we weren't making a profit on, we could then put into environmental schemes, and we've moved them around the estate to benefit everything that's on the estate. The farming system is known as controlled traffic farming. Essentially, we only drive on the same areas of the field and every year. For every operation every year. We manage that by using RTK GPS, which is accurate down to about 50 millimetres. All our soil engaging equipment, so drills, cultivators, etc., 12 metres wide. Our sprayer for crop protection products and for fertilisers is 36 metres wide. And that we can now see the difference. We were digging some soil pits in the summer with to see where we were going to use different types of cultivation. On the headlands, I could hardly get the spade into the ground, even though we've been using controlled traffic. Walk off the headland where we haven't trafficked as much, and the spade pretty much fell into the ground. So we can see over the 5 or 6 years that the controlled traffic has been that the alleviation of soil compaction has been great. And that allows the plants to root better and to grow better. So controlled traffic, our first cultivation is the combining. Use it. So we're quite up on technology. I'm fortunate I work for a guy who's quite keen on a few toys around the place. So we've now got a chaff deck on the back of the combine. So we have a blackgrass issue as well, and other weeds. So rather than spreading the chaff across the full width of the header, we're now just dropping the chaff in lines behind the combine wheels, which is where all our other vehicles and traffic. So we've got the weeds corralled into somewhere where we know where they are. About 10 to 12% of the field is taken up with either tram lines or traffic ways. So if we've pulled the blackgrass seeds into 10% of the field, there's a quick bit of mass. That 100,000 seeds per square metre will reduce our yield by a tonne a hectare. If we've just pulled that into 10% of the field, we should get an incremental gain on the rest of the field of another 10%. That's the theory that they sold to us. We can see this year where the black grass now is, has emerged, and before we drilled had started to pull it into lines in the field. We use a chaser bin when combining, which takes the grain to the side of the field, so we're using low compaction equipment all the time, or low ground pressure equipment all the time. And we're now starting to bale straw, which is something which might be at odds with some people's perceptions of what's going on, but our belief is that if we chop the straw and incorporate it into the soil, it's taking up 50 to 60 kilos per hectare of nitrogen to break that down of soil nitrogen. If we take the straw off, which is quite a valuable commodity at the moment, we can then turn that money into organic manures and into compost. So we're putting more easily digestible organic material back into the soil. So the soils are a real focus of what we're doing with controlled traffic farming as well. There's a quick picture of a combine and chaser bin working this last summer. Slightly close-up picture of the chaser bin. The tractor also runs on GPS as well, so once he's locked in and unloading, he's on auto steer, and the combine is just gradually moving backwards and forwards to load the chaser bin. So we're just staying exactly on the right areas of the field. That's my other son driving it. So cultivations wise, we're direct drilling where we can. So every time we disturb the soil, we're releasing carbon, and carbon is what we're trying to sequester into the soils. We're using a lot less fertilisers because we're using variable rate fertilisers, so we're only putting the fertiliser on the parts of the field where we need to put it, and we can do that either with liquids or solids or as we're drilling, so we're saving another crop across the field. There's just a quick bit on the other cultivations. For our spring cropping, and I'll come on to the cropping in a moment, we're now using a lot more cover crops than we were. When I first arrived there, we had a big blackgrass problem, and we were fallowing ground through the winter, so we could use glyphosate, which is another hot topic, to help control the blackgrass, and we weren't shielding it out with cover crops and then allowing it to germinate later as we drilled our spring bale in the spring. The cover cropping which we're using has very much come out of the Kelloggs Origins work, and the handbook sits on my desk, and we're using slightly different crops around the farm, and some of the mixtures that we would use are different to mainstream mixtures. We've reduced or stopped the use of Facilio in some of our mixtures because of the negative impact on mycorrhiza, which is another piece of work which came out of the Origins programme, the mycorrhiza being the beneficial fungi within the soil. That's our cropping. We do grow the sugar beet, which is kind of contrary to the controlled traffic, but on that farm it does help with blackgrass control because it gives us access to different range of plant protection products and herbicides. So the crop and variety choice, we're aiming to achieve a premium over feed crops on everything that we grow on the farm. Just a little bit, in North Northamptonshire, within 30 miles of Courteenhall, there are over 2.25 million tonnes of wheat used on an annual basis. So it does give us a wide market to be heading for, and we can grow varieties which suit our land type and suit our blackgrass challenges. And also the premiums are where we can grow a crop at sort of a feed price of inputs, and through the varietal choice it makes my P&L look better. So precision farming is what we use at Courteenhall and elsewhere, so all the land has been soil scanned, so we're variable rate seeding. We are using variable rate fertiliser wherever we can. We use variable rate nitrogen, yield mapping on the class combine, and we put all that stuff back into Gatekeeper, which helps churn out the maps. So it helps us make decisions we can put 4 or 5 years data, overlay it onto each other, so you can start seeing trends within the fields, and that's where our gross margin maps came from. We are working with other partners doing some remote sensing work with hyperspectral cameras, so the trick there being to try and quantify, I think, if I'm right, there's 1,472 different wavelengths of light which are reflected back. Each wavelength represents something different in a different crop type, or even in a different variety within a crop type. So we can see so subclinical septoria, so we might be able to put a plant protection product on sooner, get our timings better, and be able to use less of it because we've interacted with the septoria at an early date. And from fertiliser and crop nutrition, the side of things, we're learning more and more all the time. As we're more challenged by the reduction in fungicides which are available to us, having a healthier, stronger plant by using micronutrition is going to be better. And then we're using more manures, as I said earlier, baling the straw away. So we're invited to join the programme in 2016. Slightly hesitantly went along to the first meeting because we weren't really sure what it was going to do for us. Since then, we have found out what a beneficial programme it is. Jim has been to the farm a couple of times. We have got the mid-tier programme running, which he has, I think, we're okay with, aren't we? But some of the advice that we're getting, the practical advice on how we can actually manage the mid-tier within the framework of mid-tier has been invaluable, and as a resource to be able to pick up the phone to Jim, either myself or Will Moynihan, who's the gamekeeper who does more of the conservation work, is great because it just gives us, I have to report to a board, so if I've got an expert who's confirmed what I'm saying, it makes my life somewhat easier when I'm trying to pull something slightly controversial through a traditional board. Philip Wright has also been great. We've had 2 very different years. Last year was a very wet autumn, so just talking to him about how we might work our cultivations. We've kind of got a good plan of where we're going to be, and to get affirmation from Philip was great. And again, this year, with it being really dry, and we made some fairly bold decisions about what was wise. In the local area, there's 1 or 2 people suggesting we might be a bit mad, but yeah, again, to have Philip saying, I think you're doing the right thing, helped me sleep things. And again, we come on to the cover crops. The basis of our programme has been through the Kellogg's Origins work. So what have we done back for Kellogg's, as it were? We've hosted a farm walk, which was great. We had NIAB guys around, we were digging, we're looking for worms. I've given a talk in Dublin to some of the team members at Kellogg's talking about technology and farming. We've hosted Open Farm Sunday, where Jim and the guys here were really key in helping us plan what we're going to do, which was less is more. So we were very, very basic in what we're showing. We could take people around on trailers and saying, that's a field of bran flakes out there, and this is how it gets there. And just to be able to do it with bowls of cereal, grains of wheat for kids and adults, was great. We're just on the outside of the mill, well, between Northampton and Milton Keynes, so there's 500,000 people, or 500,000 consumers, if you want to look at it another way, who we could get onto the farm. We could show them the conservation work, we could show them fields with butterflies and flowers, which was great. It was quite exhausting though. We had the combine set up in the parkland, and that was just sort of our farming bit, and it was in amongst the Courteenhall Church fete. So we were quite proud to have all that stuff there, and the people and the questions we asked were absolutely phenomenal. So as has been alluded to by Duncan early on, some of the best time and the most productive time we have is with other like-minded farmers who you can challenge and be challenged as to what you're doing, and have a bit of an expert in the room refereeing some of it, because it does get quite heated at times in a positive way. Denmark was very much a point in fact. Some of the stuff which we're going to do in December came from being delayed in the Legoland airport for 2 hours and talking with Alistair and talking with Phil, and there might have been some beer involved. Why don't we do this? And Alistair's gone off and put this fantastic programme together about well, so as it says there, we're looking at what we can learn from organic farming and how we can farm without glyphosate, which we've been reducing our reliance on it for the last couple of years. But I've still got a long way to go to be able to farm not without it, and really convert our system out of controlled traffic into something else entirely different. So that I'm looking forward to that. So what next? Talking with the programme, from a selfish point of view, we've got Brexit coming up, we've got all sorts on. I want to see what the agricultural bill looks like, and then how we can resume. Quite a lot of the sustainability stuff that we've been doing is putting us into a good stead already. My concern, which I hope is we're quite high up on where we are on sustainability with the quality of our soils and what we're doing in our soil health. I'm hoping that's not going to penalise us as we move forward. Where the baseline is, if your baseline is where you start, how much more improvement we can make compared to somebody who's got poorer soils who can make some fairly quick improvements in a relatively short space of time. Resistance management, as I said earlier, we've got less fungicides coming, there's less herbicides about. I went to a meeting at Rothamsted a couple of years ago and Steve Moss was talking, and he said, you boys are farming at peak challenge, which was quite encouraging. So there's a lot of, on the technical side, there's a lot of challenges we have to deal with and still deliver a sustainable crop. Carbon footprinting and sequestration. Over the years we've done a bit of carbon footprinting, and a lot of the carbon footprinting models that I've seen so far rely on what goes into the field of wheat and then what that field of wheat or that crop then is by way of carbon. I was in Ireland a couple of weeks ago, and there was a slightly different view where they'd surveyed the whole farm with LiDAR, and they'd taken the top 10% of returning images and the bottom 10% of returning images, which gave them a biomass map of the whole farm. So it took all the hedges, all the trees, rough land, moorland, anything else. Then when you push that into the carbon sequestration map, it made, in this instance, cattle farming look a lot less gaseous. So I did look in the Sunday Times on Sunday, which was encouraging people to eat pork rather than beef or sheep because of the burps in inverted commas that come from beef or sheep. And there was just a little graph I stole from the chat I did ask him first, but it's showing that when you take in, the blue bar is the CO2 with no sequestration. When you take in the sequestration on the red and your 2 livestock hectare units, there you're looking at about 83% of greenhouse gases. I hope you can read that are being held back on the farm, which is a lot different picture to perhaps we're being told at other times. So what next? For me, every day is a school day. I wake up and I want to go and learn something or see something, and I think it's important that we all do the same thing, and this is an opportunity to learn. I help mentor a team, some younger farmers at the East Midland Agricultural Society through the Cultivate programme, and one of the questions we've had back from those guys when we're trying to build programmes for them is, how do I know what I don't know? Again, that's something which I'm interested in as well, because how do I know what I don't know? And I think also that the peer-to-peer learning that we talked about earlier on is vitally important. We can pick up nuggets from each other to take back to our own businesses and our own farms. I think that is me. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Charlie. He wasn't prompted at all to do that, and that's really, really refreshing to see how that's moved through from the stuff that they talked about at the beginning, the aims of the programme that Duncan's spoken about, to hear Charlie talk about, actually, I am using some of that stuff, and I hope that starts to demonstrate the value of a programme. So we've got plenty of time, so if people have got questions for either Charlie, Duncan or Dave, now's the time to shout up.
Yeah, Charlie, around the black grass and the chaff collection that you're doing, I mean, is it possible at all to bail that, especially not this year?
It is, it's difficult to bail the chaff.
Yeah. So what are you just leaving it?
So we just leave it, it leaves in a row sort of about yay wide. The chaff that comes from Western Australia, where it composts, so it heats up and it starts its own, with the heat is having a nullifying effect on some of the seeds. What else do we do with it? I don't know yet. We're kind of early days, so we know we can put it into one place. Can we then look at selectively spraying just that strip up the field, using selective herbicides on that? Glyphosate stewardship, if we're getting into that, if we can demonstrate we're only using glyphosate on 10% of the field at any one time pre-harvest, is that going to help us? So I think we've still got a lot of work to do, and we're working, there is a trials program around it as to what we get, and that, because certainly this year the blackgrass, once we got into the wheat, a lot of it had shed, so we were seeing better results in oilseed rape and barley in the early maturing crops, which are maturing at a similar time to the blackgrass. So we'll see.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask, so you say it's a voluntary scheme, but if you don't go into the scheme, can you still supply to Kellogg's, or is it a criteria that you have to be in it if you're supplying to?
What we say is that make grain available to go through into the supply chain. The commercials of that arrangement between Hedgates and the farmers has nothing to do with me, as if you like, in terms of origins. So it's about making grain available, but there's a lot more supply going to change than just from the origins farmers, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Just got a couple of dots, okay. Firstly, I know there's a lot of mention about some compost and sort of mixes. Are you offering to pay for those for farmers, or is it something that you sort of give advice and knowledge on, but it's actually their investment initially that they put it into place?
It's their investment. Like we've got a significant amount of funds that we can use in the origins program, but it's not enough to pay for a cover crop seed across all the farms. So it is, the farmers have paid for their own trial work. We've paid for all the experts and the researchers to actually take the evidence and structure the trials and then pull it together.
And then, sorry if I can, just one for Charlie. So obviously, it's great you've got such a commitment with the precision agriculture. Have you found that there's been a real benefit in terms of yield or sort of gross margin because of all your sort of payback time from all the investment you put into it, or is it more you're making more money because of the reduction on inputs? I'm just curious from your personal perspective.
So the system was in place when I arrived at the farm, so I kind of picked it up. We've tweaked it a bit. There is a lot of capital invested in it, but the time we spend cultivating and the time we actually spend doing so we're making savings in the time that we take to do things, and also from a timeliness point of view, having a 12-metre drill, which is going to take me about 10 days to do our wheat block, we can pick when we want to drill. So we can wait. This year we didn't start till the 20th of October, knowing that we can get all that done. The return on investment is an interesting question which we continue to wrestle with. And inputs-wise, we can definitely see benefits with the auto shut-offs and with the other stuff that we're doing to a more traditional system of flat rate applications. Although the caveat to that is some fields might need more than you would have put on a flat rate system because you're actually looking at what the soil needs to grow that crop. But our year-wise, we do keep just nudging up each year, which is gratifying to see.
Thank you. Hi Charlie. You mentioned that you joined the programme in 2016. Two questions. One, how did you hear about it? How did you first find out about it and your initial thoughts? And two, what made you go along to that first session? Because you did say you had doubts, so what was the motivation?
So firstly, to answer the first question, George Mason came out to see us on the farm. We were talking about wheat sales and maybe whether we could do some storage and various things, and George said, would you like to come along and join the programme? So it was an invitation from Haygates. and the way he laid it out, it was of interest, but you could go to a meeting every single day of the week in this job if you wanted to. So it's trying to work out what is most beneficial. It's a short trip down the road. It seemed to be wise to go and have a look and just see what was being said. And then from that initial meeting, we've really joined in wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Time for one more. Yeah.
Just a question, are you doing anything to mitigate against increased volatility in extreme weather?
I suppose yes we are. We're trying to increase our soil organic matter, so we're going to have better water holding capabilities and also better drainage, so we can then operate over wider windows. But from a temperature volatility, this year we had 121 days with no rain, average temperature of 22 degrees or something, so that was pretty uncomfortable, and quite how we would deal with that I don't know. Some of the varieties we're looking at are more sort of drought tolerant varieties, but I think it's, climate change is definitely here. It's how it demonstrates itself that is the challenge.
Okay. Last one.
Thanks, Jim. Probably a question more for Dave and Duncan, really. I mean, it sounds like a fantastic project, and you've obviously got some brilliant farmers on board, but as you said, they're kind of a self-selecting group. So, first of all, how are you communicating that back out to your wider supply chain? And do you do any sort of benchmarking to see that the investment you're making is actually, doing more than perhaps these progressive guides would already be doing? And, what added value is it getting? And I'm particularly interested in biodiversity, so if you've got any stats to show the return.
Good question, Jimmy. Thank you. I mean, we don't do enough to capture the information out, but we do a bit, as it were. It's always been open book, so whatever we do, we're quite happy to share. So we have, we do lean on NIAP quite heavily in terms of their membership. So for instance, the cover crop work that we did, we produced a publication at the end of it, we call it the Cover Crop Cookbook, a bit of a mouthful, which has got all the research written up in it, and it's quite an easy read. And that was made available throughout the time. Every now and again we'll push out articles into the press in terms of what we're doing as well, and we're still on various platforms. But there is more that we could be doing, and we want to do to get some of the good work out there. In terms of measures, funny enough, Dave said earlier, we spent yesterday, because we're here anyway, sort of brainstorming and thinking about activity for 2019, and measuring came up, and it's a very difficult thing actually to measure the impact of what we're doing, because it is voluntary. We're not putting audits in place to do that. But what's really reassuring, one of the key measures, or the most important measures for us, I'm concerned, in terms of whether the program's actually been successful from a farmer point of view, is that they keep turning up to meetings. If they stop turning up to meetings, I'll start to worry. But secondly, it's actually then listening to people like Charlie or talk to the other farmers in terms of understanding what have they changed on their farms as a result of that. But when it comes down to actually understanding, what that change has meant in terms of biodiversity changes and actually measuring that, we're not quite there yet. But Jim and I have been talking about it. I think we'll get there.
If I just pick up and finish off on that one, we did a couple of things. So much you do, but how much there is on every farm in terms of habitat, which we did at the very start of the programme, and then part of the advice visits, which is voluntary for the farmers, but they've all taken them up, is literally a 5-point action plan of what to do and pick 4 species that you want to manage for. So one of Charlie's recommendations, I'm going to say it, I don't know whether he's done it yet, they actually wanted to put in a beetle bank, which they hadn't done before on the farm, and that came out of going to visit them, talking about all the stuff we did, talking about our research. Is there anything that you reckon we could do, Jim? We talked about mixes and all sorts of stuff, but the one thing that came out was, we'll put a beetle bank in there and that will make a difference. So we know on that level where people have taken, or we're beginning to understand where they've taken our advice, but actually measuring biodiversity changes, that's mega expensive and quite difficult to actually achieve. I'm conscious of lots of questions. We are going to do a panel session at the end, so you will get a chance to come back again. And at that, we'll just take literally a 10-minute comfort break. get your coffee cups, have a drink of water. If you can come back in 10 minutes, we'll give you a shout. We'll start again. Thank you.
That might give us a few more minutes.
Oh, you're man. Oh, Ian.
Yeah, good.